Hello, I am James D. Watkins, Artistic Director of Odyssey Works, Eclipse Enterprises, and Phoenix Productions. This is my book review, regular reviews that I will be doing. Now, my book reviews will be somewhat off the cuff, somewhat kind of loose, different than what I'm used to doing, which is very structured artistic works. Book reviews is more, how do I put this, out of the box opinions and thoughts on certain books that I read. Now, some people may ask, why do a book review? Because every channel on the known earth is doing either a streaming review, video review, or movie reviews. The reason why I choose to do book reviews is because, well, one, I have a wide range of topics in my mind that I'm interested in, and I like to read books written by other people on their thoughts on certain topics that I'm interested in, number one. Number two, I would have to say, sometimes, you ever heard that phrase, if there's a book and then a movie, the movie didn't translate from the book well? Well, I like to read the book sometimes, a certain behind the scenes. So that's one reason, two reasons why. But the biggest reason why I'm doing book reviews is because the majority of people don't read in today's society. Mainly why. Now, there's some guidelines on my book reviews. The book reviews will be no more than, let's say, 13, 50 minutes long. However, depending on the book and the subject that I choose to cover and review, there may be installments of the book review on that particular book, depending how big it is. Because let's face it, there's some long, big-ass books out there. And these authors and writers, I give them credit. They spent not months, but years writing certain these books. War and Peace, for example. Big ass book. And sometimes I don't have time for that. You know what I mean? I work a job, do my own productions on the side. So that's being upfront with you on that. Now, depending on the size and the length of certain books, I will be doing highlighting of certain chapters. And if I highlight certain chapters and the theme and the subject matter of the book and the objectives of the book, I will let you know. So it's not cheating you, stating, yeah, I watched the whole movie. No, I really left at half of the movie because it sucked ass. Same thing with books. I'm not gonna say I read the whole book. No, certain things I will highlight and spotlight and talk about if the book is big ass. I don't just have time. Now, my rating runs like this. 1 page means it's not worth your time or the read. 10 pages means, yes, it is worth your time. Pick it up or use a online reader, however they have it now, Kindle, Firebox, whatever they have. Or just simply go to a library or a bookstore and pick up a regular book, which is good to feel it in your hands. So, having said that, I'm ready to get started. Are you? Get ready to start it? That sounds so cheesy, doesn't it? This book review is called Changing Focus: Kodak and the Battle to Save a Great American Company. The author is Alicia Swayze. Don't worry, I'll type her name up in front of the video or even in the back of the video. The beginning of the end. The generation that grew up seeing the lives of Ozzie and Harriet Nelson or June and Ward Cleaver on television was now finding their own real lives mirrored in another sitcom, Roseanne, the Roseanne Barr Show. Roseanne in its depressing presentation of real life. This was a reality where mom and dad drifts in and out of jobs, and the family has trouble paying the mortgages or their rent and the electric bill. Now, some resort to food stamps and welfare just to get by. Other people or other families had to start packing their lunches instead of eating out, and they had to conserve money to pay mortgages and health insurance payments as well. There was no more planning trips or cruises, no more booking hotel rooms, and no more plane ticket purchases. These people were jobless, and their unemployment checks had run out, or it was nearing its term's benefits. Foreclosures, repossessions became commonplace. Now, this was the beginning of the end. The end of Eastman Kodak Company, founded by George Eastman, which I'll get to a little bit later. George Eastman and his Eastman Kodak Company was the ruler of the film world, and this was the end of a, I would say, mentality. It was an end of a mentality. Well, the habit was, she wrote it like this: a paternalistic mentality, or it could be like a parentalistic mentality. I think I miswrote this. I'm not sure why I did that way, but like I said, my book reviews is off the cuff. It flies by. It's not really structured, but I get what she was saying here, the author. It was a mentality where a society is beholden or depends solely on a corporation or company as like a parent. I think that's what she meant. A parentalistic mentality that Eastman Kodak fostered in Rochester, New York. Yes, because I'll get to this in a minute, but in Rochester, New York, Eastman Kodak Company was like, let's say, the Walt Disney World Company in Orlando, Florida, the biggest employer. By the way, it's my hometown and home base. Eastman Kodak was the biggest employer in Rochester, New York, along with Xerox Corporation and Bausch Shalom right behind it. Now, if you had someone in your family that would work at Kodak or George Eastman Kodak Company, then you most likely will be called a Kodaker or possibly Smugtown, which I never did like that phrase, Smugtown. But a Kodaker, yeah, we've heard that a lot in my family. What happened to Kodak can be applied to any industry. Let me back up. What happened to Kodak can be and will be applied to any industry or business. And even though Alicia Swazi wrote this book in 1997, it is still relevant today. Because of Kodak, Rochester, New York had what was perceived as a polite arrogance. Interesting term, I would say. And Kodak was considered the yellow father to Rochester and all its employees and its employees' families. My own father worked the majority of his life at Eastman Kodak. The majority of my church members, parents of my school friends, were employed by this yellow father. That all changed. But before we hit the end, this is the beginning. As I mentioned, it was started by George Eastman. George Eastman started Kodak in 1879, and he marketed and he advertised the slogan, "You press the button, we do the rest." Catchy. You press the button, and we do the rest. It was on all the boxes of the Kodak cameras and film. He put it there. Eastman was business associates with another somewhat inventor, Thomas Edison. And George Eastman sold his film, to Thomas Edison. Now, eventually, Eastman Kodak film became the dominant supplier of film to the Hollywood industry for what seemed forever. In fact, reading this book and research, George Eastman helped a young filmmaker in animation called Walter Elias Disney. He helped fund and gave him a loan to help start his cartoon, which came into an empire of its own. Now, it's been said that Kodak produced enough film to reach the moon and back. That's what they say. Basically, one could say that Kodak had a near monopoly on the film business, and out of that monopoly, an arrogance was born. In 1932, George Eastman committed suicide at his Eastman House mansion. Now, it is a museum right now on East Avenue in Rochester, New York. I've been there several times on school trips. At his bed was a note that he wrote before he committed suicide. This is what the note read. Quote, "My work is done. Why wait?" End quote. After Eastman's death, Eastman Kodak Company grew and became complacent, very complacent. There were competitors such as inventor Edward Land and Edwin Land, Edwin Land. And Mr. Land created Polaroid, and he tried to sell his instant photography to Kodak, and he was rebuffed by Kodak and Fujifilm, but neither had the clout and status as a Kodak film. Kodak wanted to maintain the status quo, meaning the leadership of Kodak at that time, the CEOs and executives, the chairman, the presidents of Kodak at that time, they did not want to think outside the box, or in Kodak's case, the yellow box. It's cheesy. I came up with that. But anyway, at its peak in the 1980s, Kodak was employing, get this, approximately 93,300 people in the United States alone. What's interesting is that a lot of that workforce was doubling down for the oncoming digital onslaught. And in 1982, Kodak brought forth the disc camera. Now the disc camera, again, this came out in 1982. It captured images onto a small disc that contained tiny chips for exposure. Kodak spent a then unheard of at this time. Again, this is 1982. Kodak spent $40 million advertising and marketing this disc camera, but it failed in the marketplace because competitors such as Fuji was creating smaller, simpler, and cheaper point-and-shoot cameras. And so Kodak discontinued the disc camera. Of course, hindsight is 20/20 in everything. But the lack of foresight, vision, and risk-taking started to take its toll on Kodak. They became bloated. In order to cut back on personnel, this is what they offered. They offered optional retirement and separation plan, and over 5,000 employees took it, which Kodak didn't expect. And it left a huge hole in some departments. The layoffs didn't stop there. No, it continued. In 1991, Kodak introduced the Triple R. This is what the Triple R stood for: Resource, Redeployment, and Retirement Plan. And that was an extremely generous retirement packages. And over 8,000 employees took it. In fact, a lot of my church members, school friends, parents took that package, Triple R. Now, the author did a great job. She detailed in chronicling, the genesis of Eastman Kodak's fall and transformation. She does list the leadership which led to this downfall, unfortunately. From Colby Chandler to Kay Whitmore, who, by the way, Kay Whitmore actually fell asleep during a meeting with Bill Gates. All the way to George Fisher, and he attempted to right the wrongs of Kodak. Details, such as during the mass layoffs, an employee came to work despite having a broken back. And the reason why this guy came to work, he was scared to take any time off from work because Kodak was laying off. Much to Kodak's credit, they were still resilient in trying to stay competitive. In 1992, they manufactured the photo CD. They invested and they dabbled in other industries, such as the copier business, which they still function in some ways, healthcare, batteries. My father brought home a lot of Kodak batteries, pharmaceuticals, and Eastman Chemicals. But it wasn't enough. In the year of 2012, Eastman Kodak Company had to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Basically, that protects the company from having everything seized from creditors, so they were still able to operate. The bankruptcy filings took place after this book was written, because like I said, this book, it was written back in 1987, so took place after that, the bankruptcy filings. And Eastman Kodak may not be what it was or once was, but it morphed and it transitioned into a viable business today. Now, my review time. I do appreciate the level of detail Alicia Swayze gives, but in some instances, the details comes across as padding or filler, and even though it may be about the anxiety and nervousness of some of these workers who got left, personally, I didn't need to know about those workers' day-to-day lives in great detail. Didn't need to know that. I do give her credit though, and kudos, because she references business practices that most people, most of you are not aware of. For an example, there is an institutional organization that pulls, that's maybe a bad word, that pulls their members' financial contributions into investments and, how to put this, CalPERS, that's it, CalPERS I should say, is one of those institutions that takes people's money for their retirement and they put them to investments. CalPERS. CalPERS is spelled CalPERS. It's the biggest organization that does this. It stands for this. You ready? California Public Employees Retirement System. Basically, as I mentioned, workers in the state of California put their money in a retirement fund. And if it is with CalPERS, then CalPERS could use that investment money that those workers gave them to invest in different businesses. And Eastman Kodak was one of those investments. And they're not the only ones. I've done, when you see my series of these book reviews, there's a lot of corporations that use CalPERS monies to get things done. Now, the author, she does bring up a good point in that when a company fires or layoffs many of their workers, Wall Street and the investors of Wall Street reap the benefits of those people losing their jobs. And that company is rewarded by having their shares go up in turn. And the investors in Wall Street make more money. It's a vicious cycle. So basically, you get laid off, you lose your job. If the company is a public company listed on the NASDAQ, SEC, for whatever exchange, the investors in that company rejoice, or they reap the benefits, they make more money because that company that laid you off or fired you or terminated you, they're able to save money off of that. And so the investors basically reap the benefits of that. It's a vicious cycle. Eastman Kodak Company founded the Eastman School of Music, the Eastman Museum, the Eastman Theater, the Rochester Planetarium, and was a benefactor of a host of other endeavors in Rochester, New York, and of course around, but mainly in Rochester, New York. But unfortunately, business is business. And when Fujifilm, 3M, and the digital revolution came, Kodak was too big and too bloated to act quickly. It was not nimble enough to move smoothly. That is why Odyssey, Eclipse, and Phoenix, I streamline my operations productions. I had to learn it the hard way. I've lost thousands of dollars in the past. So I've learned to work a little bit more thin, as much as possible, but still doing quality work. Eastman Kodak were not the only local companies like that. Xerox Mobile, Bar Shalom also had layoffs that affected the Rochester landscape. On a sad note, John Singleton, he worked at Eastman Kodak since 1953. He was laid off in March of 1996. March of 1986. Sorry about that. He was laid off in March of 1986. Again, he started work in 1953, laid off from Kodak in March of 1986. He suffered a massive heart attack at Kodak headquarters, and he died soon thereafter. His son, Tim, was one of my best friends in high school. This last part is so important, but it's true. There's no guarantee in life or any job. And Alicia Swayze mentions this several times in her book. To her, I give her credit on this. It's a cruel, cold fact. There's no guarantees in anything. It's a vicious dog-eat-dog world. As mentioned earlier, thousands lose their job. And those investors on Wall Street are actually rewarded and they make more money, all because other people lost their livelihood. Sometimes their retirements as well. Sad. Changing focus. Kodak in the battle to save a great American company. This book has 244 pages. My review for this book, again, 1 means it's not worth your time. To 10 pages, that means it's worth your time. I give this book a solid 8.5 page review. Thank you so much. I am, again, James D. Watkins, Odyssey, Eclipse, and Phoenix. Like I said before, I can't even say my company's name. Odyssey, Eclipse, and Phoenix. Again, these book reviews, they're loose. It gives me a time to decompress, okay? Because I'm a very rigid artist, business person. But my book reviews are loose and to decompress as well. So I would say thank you so much. Again, I give this book 8.5 reviews. I'm James D. Watkins. Thank you.